I'm an Eagle Scout. I went to law school, started at community college. I went to be a Fulbright Scholar. And through that expertise and that learning, I advised some of the biggest companies in the world. I advised Senator Jacobs' own family on issues and complex business transactions. I want this country to have the chances for my family and those around me that I had. And I'm here tonight not to fight for my family or fight for my company or fight for my business. I'm here to fight for the people of Western New York, that you'll have the opportunities in a country that's fair and has access for all.
All right, gentlemen, thanks very much. First question goes to Nate. Now, we saw unrest in both Buffalo and Rochester recently, plenty of it over the past couple of weeks. This was followed by calls for change. So what kind of change do you think would best help police community relations across Western New York? And how would you work on Capitol Hill to support this?
Well, first and foremost, I need to say that I oppose violence and I support our police. But if we do not recognize that we have a real problem, then we're missing something. There's millions of people that are demonstrating for a reason. I haven't been silent about this. I've been very vocal about it. My opponent has been very quiet. We need a society that's fair. And you can't just say it's a few bad apples. If Wegmans had a few bad apples and people died, you send in the health department. You send in people to look at it and see what the problem was. When I go to Washington, I promise to defend the rights of our officers, but also to work towards a society where we care for each other and it respects the human rights of all individuals.
Senator Jacobs, your rebuttal, if you like.
I would say that I share the sentiment of almost every American that we were horrified by watching the brutal murder of George Floyd, and I hope that individual is brought to justice and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, as well as the other three men who were there and didn't do what they should have done. But we need law and order. That is critically important in our society. And unfortunately, peaceful protests were hijacked by radicals. And unfortunately, Nate McMurray is supporting defunding the police and disarming the police.
That's a lie.
That is not a lie. You
When
are.
did I ever say that?
You support
That's a lie.
AOC.
That's a
and
lie.
all those members.
Gentlemen, we will give you each opportunities to rebut one another. So, Chris, please finish your thought.
His commercials lie, and now he's lying here on the stage.
Chris, please finish your thought. Nate, I'll give you some time.
Nate has supported Bernie Sanders, AOC, radicals who support defunding and disarming the police. Nate has also been vocal. He has said he is for sanctuary cities, which is bringing chaos and lawlessness to cities. This is a tweet you said. You wish more cities would be like San Francisco. You said that. You did.
Listen, we need to talk about this for a second, because this guy, all he does is lie. He's going to try to buy the position. He's going to lie. PolitiFact said his claims that he's making right now are false.
Not about
and I'm not going to stand here and listen to him lie about me. And the people of Western New York should look into his lies. And by the way, maybe we should have Beth Parlato up here to face you, too, so you can hear about your lies.
Okay, gentlemen, let's move on to the next question, this one to Chris. There are now some 18,000 law enforcement agencies in this country, and many go by different standards. Senator Jacobs, should there be a national standard use of force?
Well, I think one of the things I would talk about in Congress would be more uniform training across the board. In New York State, we have very high, rigorous training for our law enforcement. It's not standardized. Other places around the country do not. We should have a consistent level and more resources for that. But I would say, Nate just said it's not just a few bad apples. It's across the board that we have racism in our police forces. We have 800,000 policemen and women in this country, and the overwhelming majority are doing a fantastic job and wake up every day and should not be cast that they are racist as well. That is not a productive way to move this discussion forward.
We can either lead or we can follow. And right now, our region is not leading, and we need to lead, because people across the region have been protesting and demonstrating and saying we need a better country, a country that is more fair and that honors the rights of all people. I'm a person that has a business background. Every contract has two sides. And for it to have true law and order, you have to have both sides committed to that principle. And right now, we do not have that in this country. And I'll fight for a system that protects all of our citizens.
Gentlemen, thank you. Now let's go to Adam Chodak, who will be asking a question back to Nate about the federal government's response to the protests.
President Trump last week called governors weak and urged them to dominate American cities, particularly those impacted by civil unrest. He also threatened to use the Insurrection Act, which allows the president to call up active duty military as a response to that unrest. Do you think the current situation would justify the use of the U.S. military against citizens on American soil?
Absolutely not. I think it's a tragedy that he even brought that up. It's an embarrassment to our country. That's what tyrannies do. Now, I was a Fulbright scholar. I studied the constitutional law of several countries in Asia and the impact of the United States on those countries. People look up to us around the world, and President Trump is embarrassing us and violating our freedom of speech and violating the tenets that make America what it is. He is making America something else. It's not America anymore when you have their citizens being attacked by the military.
Well, I say that, again, the moment in time of the tragedy of George Floyd presented a unique opportunity in terms of this country coming together. Everyone across the board condemned that senseless murder, and I believe that was a real opportunity to move discussion forward. Unfortunately, those peaceful protests were hijacked by radicals, and then we saw violence, rioting, looting, police officers being shot and killed. That is not the America that will move us forward. And I salute anyone who's stepping up to say we need to bring law and order back to this country. Again, Nate is admired China's law enforcement, Korea's law enforcement, because they don't have guns.
Honestly, what are you talking about?
We don't believe that here.
What are you talking
Gentlemen,
about?
let's move on. Gentlemen, let's move on. This one back to Senator Jacobs. Today, the president weighed in on the incident involving a man being shoved during a protest at Niagara Square. Now, the video of the incident has, of course, garnered national attention. It's gone viral and has led to 2 Buffalo police officers facing felony assault charges. Now, the president alleged 75-year-old Martin Gugino is a, quote, Antifa provocateur. He says Gugino was scanning police equipment to black it out, and he says Gugino fell harder than he was pushed, further alleging the incident was a staged setup. So, Senator Jacobs, Mr. Gugino, he's been in the hospital since this incident, was in serious condition for days. Do you really believe, like the president, that this was a setup?
Well, let me first say that I, like anybody who watched that video, felt strongly how terrible it was that Mr. Gugino was harmed. I'm glad, so glad he's doing better in the hospital. We need to get to the bottom of the situation and what happened there, but we don't want to have violence. Now, I will also say that I was shocked that these law enforcement officers were charged with felonies, because felonies, you need intent to injure, and I believe that those officers were doing their job, but they did not have an intent to injure. We cannot malign the law enforcement community if we're going to move forward with productive discussions in our community.
You didn't answer the question. He said, do you agree with the president's craziness on Twitter? You didn't answer the question. Now I'm talking now. It's my turn. You can answer after if he gives you time. You didn't answer the question because you do not have the guts to stand up to that man. How are you going to be in Washington if you can't stand up to him now? Let me say to people out there, what he did embarrassed our city. This should be looked into by the rule of law. If you believe in the rule of law, trust the process. But I'm not going to agree with a president who says a Catholic peace protester is a member of Antifa. And you should have the guts to say the same thing.
Mayor Brown said he was an agitator. Mayor Brown said that.
You agree with what the president said.
I agree with Mayor Brown, too.
Question.
I support the president's...
Answer his question.
I think the preeminent role...
You're not willing to say that crazy tweet is wrong?
Nate,
Please let me answer. Nate, may I answer?
You better answer.
I think
because you're going to have to answer when you go to D.C.
Nate,
I know you're having a tender tantrum here, but let me just answer.
Nate.
Answer.
I believe the preeminent role, the primary role of elected officials is to keep citizens safe. I believe mayors have an obligation to do that. Our mayor's doing it here in Buffalo. I believe our governors have to do it. If in places they are not taking on that responsibility as a last resort, I think the president is right to look at all options and leave them on the table.
He didn't answer the question. He did not answer the question.
Chris, do you believe? Nate, thank you.
Okay.
Chris, I'm curious if you believe and agree with the president, particularly about calling this man an Antifa provocateur and suggesting that this fall and his injuries were a staged setup.
I think we need to get to the bottom of this. I think that these police officers were doing what they were trained to do. This was after the curfew was expired, and why was that individual walking up and gesturing towards the belt of a police officer?
Answer the question again.
Nate.
I'm saying there's questions that need to be answered here.
No, you didn't answer his question first.
Gentlemen, let's move on.
Yep.
Nate, this one to you.
I'm ready.
Do you believe the federal government should ban police officers from performing chokeholds? This is something that is being discussed not only here in New York State. In fact, it's being kicked around in Albany right now, but it's also being discussed nationally. This goes along the lines of that sort of national standard. So chokeholds specifically in this case, do you agree with that?
Let me do what politicians don't do, like people like Mr. Jacobs over here. Yes, they should be banned. And let me say this. I have experience working in a small town as the commissioner of police. I worked with our officers. I loved them. They're great people. But we have to look at this seriously and say we have a problem in this country. And chokeholds is something that has repeatedly caused problems. How many of these deaths are not on tape? We saw an 8-minute execution that shocked the conscience of our country. And it's time for us to act. And there's kids in Orchard Park. There's kids in Warsaw. There's kids all over this district, all these places you've never been to before, protesting right now, saying we need change. Why haven't you gone to any of these protests? Why haven't you said a word about it in a week and a half? Where you been?
Senator Jacobs?
Well, actually, Nate, I am in favor of banning chokeholds. And actually, today, in the legislature, I voted for a bill to ban chokeholds in New York State.
Good. It took you a week to say it.
Gentlemen, let's move on. This one to Chris. The president last week ordered the aggressive removal of protesters for a photo op, and that was at St. John's Episcopal Church in Washington. The move has been heavily criticized by Democrats, and including many Republicans. Senator Jacobs, where do you stand on the president's actions?
Well, I disagree with the premise. I don't believe that that area was cleared for the photo op. I think that it was cleared because there had been serious and severe rioting and damage and injury to many, hundreds of police officers in Washington, D.C., and there was an effort to establish a more protective perimeter to protect that area around the White House. So I don't agree with the premise. And what we saw, what we have seen in Washington, D.C. is outrageous with the violence and the damage, loss of life, loss of property. That's unacceptable. And again, lawlessness is not how we are going to advance things. Nate McMurray has supported efforts to decrease law enforcement, and he's for, again, sanctuary cities.
Mr. McMurray.
PolitiFact said he's lying. He lies in his commercials.
Mr. McMurray, I have a follow-up, and I'll give you your time.
I will say definitively, the president, we're living in fantasy land. He's willing to believe whatever fantasy Donald Trump says. The timing just happened to coincide with that crazy Bible show that he did that disrespected every church and every religion and violated the freedom, the Constitution and the separation of church and state. You need to get a backbone if you're going to Washington. Anybody who saw that, and most Americans who saw that agree with me and agree with what I'm saying, and they're probably sitting at home right now applauding. What he did was wrong, and it was embarrassing to our country.
Senator Jacobs, I do have a follow-up kind of along these lines. The Black Lives Matter movement certainly has gained tremendous momentum since the murder of George Floyd. Now, with demonstrations have grown across the country, they've also grown all across the world, calling for racial equality and an end to police brutality. So what are your thoughts about the Black Lives Matter movement? And do you believe that this movement is really what this country needs for effective change?
Look, we have racial problems in this country still. We made advancements, but we have a long way to go. We need to continue to work to move forward, and we choose to do things in our world and our lives to improve that. I've tried in my career to help kids have a better chance for a better education. I've helped over 20,000 low-income children in the last 25 years. Over 50% of those 20,000 were minorities. But I would say, as an organization, I am very concerned about some of the ideology that Black Lives Matter is perpetuating. Number one, right on their website, they're saying defund the police. Even the Democratic presidential candidate has disavowed that statement, that is not a way to advance things. So we have to be thoughtful, and we have to not fall into hyperbole on this, but we need to work together, and we need not to be divisive to say every single law enforcement officer is racist and they should be defunded. They keep us safe. all communities.
Certainly, Black Lives Matter is not saying that all law enforcement officers are a problem. They are saying very much that the bad apples need to be weeded out. And
they are calling for defunding the police.
Sure,
that's
some
right
of them
on their website.
Sure. Nate, do you have a rebuttal to that?
Yes, I do. Number one, can he answer a question? He asked if you support Black Lives Matter. The answer for me is yes, because I support the fact that we have to get to a culture that defends the rights of all people. And a certain group of people, African Americans, have been perpetually discriminated against in our country. And we have to address the issue. Who agrees with me? Roger Goodell from the NFL, most major corporations. He won't say it because President Trump won't say it. He won't say anything unless President Trump says it. And I will stand up to President Trump or Nancy Pelosi, whoever else, and I will answer questions. He does not seem to be able to do that.
Moving on, gentlemen, let's head back to Adam Chodak, who has another question for Mr. McMurray about the federal stimulus.
The House recently passed an additional $3 trillion aid package with a lot of stuff packed in there. Another round of stimulus checks, mortgage and rent relief money, student forgiveness, and more. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said it would be dead on arrival in the Senate. Do you think the next stimulus plan should at least look like the so-called HEROES Act in size, or do you favor a scaled-down version?
There are problems with the HEROES Act. There are giveaways to people that I don't agree with, just like there was in the first bill. The first bill that gave people like Chris Jacobs over here, the real estate developers, a $170 billion tax break and a $500 billion slush fund for corporations that didn't keep their employees. What I favor for is extending the unemployment benefits until we fix this health problem. We cannot continue to give money to people like the Jacobs, who have plenty of it, trust me on this, and while we leave everyday Americans behind. When I go to Washington, I will work to pass legislation that defends working families, not the most rich and also the most entitled among us.
Mr. Jacobs, before you jump in, Mr. McMurray, I'm curious as to how you want the federal government to pay for those stimulus bills to extend unemployment benefits for the millions of Americans who continue to be jobless.
When we're talking about working people, we're talking about everyday Americans, we always ask, how are we going to pay for it? When we're talking about $2 trillion or $3 trillion of the 2018 tax cut that I'm sure Mr. Jacobs benefited from greatly, why don't you release your tax return so we can see how much money you got from that? We don't worry about how we're going to pay for it. When we talk about Social Security or health care, or unemployment for people who have been let go by companies that were given a $500 billion slush fund, we worry about how we're going to pay for it. But when we're talking about people like the Jacobs, who get endless tax cuts and tax benefits, we never ask that question. So number one, I'm going to repeal that tax cut that's defunding Social Security and putting America at risk and benefits Chris over here.
Mr. Jacobs, would you like to rebut, sir?
Well, I think the CARES Act was incredibly important, in particular programs like the Paycheck Protection Program, which gave assistance to small businesses throughout this country to help them stay operational during this COVID crisis. Also, it was an excellent model of partnership where it partnered with the private sector banking institutions so a small business could go to the local bank that they work with to get the money. And the result was that money got on the street quickly, $300 billion on the street in a couple weeks, lifeblood, keeping the lights on of these businesses, keeping people employed. We have to look at efforts like that, not a $3 trillion progressive ideological giveaway, which Nate would support because that's Nancy Pelosi's baby.
Well, whatever. I mean, that's just ridiculous. How much money did you get from the last cut? How much? Put your tax returns out there so we can see it.
Let's moving on, gentlemen. Mr. Jacobs, this one to you. The economy has been hard hit, of course, by the coronavirus pandemic, and the unemployment rate in Western New York alone is now more than 19%. So what can the federal government do to get your constituents back to work?
Well, the first thing is get back to work. It's my belief that the governor has been too slow here on getting us back to work, I really believe we're heading into the phase 3 of opening. We should compress the phase 3 and phase 4 and get things going here again, fully the economy going. And do it. People are being smart. They're social distancing. People taking temperatures and so forth. We can do this in a smart way, but we got to get working again. That's the main way we're going to get things going again. Certainly, we need to look at federal aid to some extent, But the most important thing is to get open again. And the great news is we had incredible job improvement numbers. Unemployment went down significantly, meaning what it shows is the economy that President Trump helped create through his tax cuts several years ago, helped create a fundamentally sound economy, and those fundamentals are still sound and still there. That's why it's going to be able to rebound more quickly than we had worried about.
So just to follow up on that, what kind of specific steps do you think you'll take, if elected, on Capitol Hill to help make those desires a reality?
Well, I think that the Paycheck Protection Act, again, was just amended to allow it to be dispersed for a longer period of time. That's actually not going to be more expenditure of money, but just utilization of the allocation already. I think things like that are the smart way to go. A $3 trillion, which has some of the most ridiculous things in it, that's going to saddle multiple generations with debt, just so Nancy Pelosi and AOC and Bernie Sanders can drive their socialist agenda, the socialism that Nate McMurray wants to get to. That is such an abuse of the crisis.
Why would your family hire a socialist to do business development for them? They must be out of their mind, I guess.
Mr. McMurray, I'm curious what you will do to drop that soaring high number of 19% unemployment in Western New York.
Number one, the fact that he thinks that the economy is good just tells you what a bubble he's in. It's good for guys like him. It's not good for the families at NO27. It's not good to the towns he's never been to. It's not good to the people I've seen for these last 3 years who've been struggling. He's going to complain about giveaways when him and his supporters and the people at the top have already been benefited from a tax cut that 83% of the benefits went to 1% of the people. That's wrong. He doesn't understand what the average people are going through. That's why he thinks the economy is good. But for most people in Western New York, it ain't so good. And you've been a state senator. What have you done to improve things? We have the worst job market in the country, according to the Wall Street Journal. The worst job market in the country. The guy's been in office for years. What has he done to fix it?
Mr. McMurray, we're going to go back to you with this next question. Everyone from the governor to town supervisors in the 27th district have called on the federal government to send billions of dollars in federal aid to help offset revenue loss because of the pandemic. So if elected, where would you stand on providing that assistance, and how would you gain support for it?
I would do it because it's going to support the people that he says he supports, the people like our first responders, our police, our fire. That's what we need to do. We need to make sure. We already were destroyed in New York State by that tax bill he seems to like so much. It took away state and local tax exemptions. It crushed New York State. We fund the rest of the union. If I go to D.C., I'll represent New York State first and foremost. I won't represent a party. I won't represent any politician. I won't swear my allegiance to Trump. I swear my allegiance to New York State and the people of this region. So I will fight for the people of this region. So yes, I will support funding to make sure that our local municipalities are safe and be able to provide the services they need to provide.
Senator Jacobs, Mr. McMurray is talking about SALT, of course. That is standing for the State and Local Taxes Bill. That has been a difficulty that Governor Cuomo has talked about ever since it was approved. I'm curious where you stand on SALT, and if you think that, particularly given the economic hardships states like New York and others are experiencing, would you be able to ease some of those restrictions to provide some relief to New York State?
Well, I'd certainly look at the SALT issue, raising it a bit. I will say it's ironic he's criticizing SALT because the beneficiaries of those that were harmed by the SALT change were very, very rich people, typically in New York City.
They're homeowners. They're regular homeowners who don't know what you're talking
about. Mr.
McMurray?
But I would say this, that as far as aid to local governments, I am for that, certainly having worked closely with the local governments in my district. My concern is that it doesn't just go to New York State government, because New York State government has a history of not giving the money out that they get. And we're seeing this now. Some of the money that's already come is being hoarded by New York State and not going down to the local governments that need it. So that's what we need to work on. And also, I am not about subsidizing an inefficient New York State government. This government has had problems. It had a deficit by this governor of $6 billion before COVID ever started because of mismanagement of the Medicaid program. So we shouldn't subsidize poor management and bad policymaking.
You're
now,
the manager.
Just to clarify, when it comes to Mr. McMurray,
he's the state
Mr.
senator.
McMurray, when it comes to that notion of subsidies from the federal government to New York State, keep in mind New York State is one of several states in this country, but perhaps the biggest state when it comes to giving that money back. Tens of millions of more money goes to the federal government than is accepted in New York State. Let's move on, and we'll hear again from Adam Chodak, who has a question for Senator Jacobs, again about the pandemic.
What should the federal government do to prepare for another pandemic going forward?
Well, I think that I certainly hope it's not for another 100 years like this one was. The last one's 100 years ago. But I think we absolutely need to be better prepared. We need, with ventilators, PPE, testing, and all those things, we certainly need to, and the president is leading on this, on getting a vaccine, which would be the main thing. I would also say one of the things, the opportunities that come out of this pandemic is the realization that Donald Trump was right about China. China is a threat to this nation, and that we, over the last number of decades, have been penny wise and pound foolish in our policies by allowing all these manufacturing jobs to go overseas. We now need to recognize that manufacture of pharmaceuticals is a national security issue. We need to bring those back. We need to recognize that our food chain is part of national security, and our farmers are on the front line of that, and we need to support them more. So those are the things, I think, the opportunities that come out of this to build a much more strong, secure, stronger economic and stronger national security-wise economy and nation out of result of this.
Well, two things. Number one, I got to go back to say he's complaining about New York State government. He is New York State government. He has been in government his entire adult life. He's complaining about something that he's had control over. Beyond that, what can we do about the pandemic? Let's talk about the pandemic. First of all, it's real for those who are watching. 30,000 New Yorkers plus have died, over 100,000 Americans. Now, we look at across the rest of the world, it hasn't happened like that. It's a fiasco, a historical fiasco what happened in our country. If you look at South Korea, they have less deaths. We almost have double the deaths in Erie County than the entire nation of South Korea with 50 million people. And if you don't want to look at South Korea or Germany or New Zealand, look at small countries with very little technology, like Senegal. We are underperforming Senegal. What's happening in this country is horrible and is targeting the most vulnerable Americans. It's something that if he can't stand up to him now, what is he going to do in D.C.? If he's not going to fight for us now, what is he going to do when he gets there?
Senator Jacobs, Mr. McMurray was critical of your critiques of state government, saying that you indeed are part of that state government. Of course, you are a state senator and have been for a couple of years. Talk to me a little bit about how you feel about your involvement in state government.
Well, I've been in state government 3.5 years, so let's just say that. Certainly,
Comptroller, you've been in politics
Mr.
your entire
McMurray,
life.
the question was directed to Mr. Jacobs.
But no, I've been a critic of this state government, this leadership, this governor. We spend more than any other state government in the nation for education and get very little to return for it. Our Medicaid is twice some other states that have similar populations. That's why we have this crisis right now. And the other thing is we've enacted progressive policy over progressive policy, many of the liberals, the leftists that Nate likes so much, that have made it so business unfriendly here. So many jobs have left our areas in upstate New York that our economy is so beholden only to New York City. And now New York City, the bottom's fallen out of that economic marketplace and that tax base. We are in a financial free fall here, but it's a lot of our doing by mismanagement over the last 3 decades.
Mr. McMurray, would you like to rebut that?
First of all, what he did as a state senator is vote against COVID sick pay. He's already voted against things that help people here. He was one of only six people who voted against it. He has a record where he either dodges votes or votes for things that hurt working people. Now, he's also sitting here praising that tax bill. I can't even believe it, which basically bankrupted New York State. It took away funding from New York State. When I go to D.C., I'm going to look at Trump. I'm going to look at anyone who's down there. I'm going to say, some of that tax money we're paying, it's got to come back to New York. Does he have the guts to say that to Trump? I will.
Senator Jacobs, let's go ahead and continue to talk about some of your involvement at the state level. Of course, a lot has happened when recession restarted on Monday. A number of police reform bills, among them perhaps one of the most talked about, particularly among the media, is 50A, the repeal of 50A. And of course, 50A keeps secret personnel files and disciplinary records of members of law enforcement. Today, that was overwhelmingly approved by the Senate. It now heads to the House. How did you vote on 50A? And where do you stand on the repeal of that controversial law?
First, I'd say police records are available, and by a judge, you have to go to court to get them. So they are available. I voted against 50A, the repeal of 50A, because I think it would be a trial lawyer's dream, a criminal defense attorney's dream, because they can get every single complaint that is filed against any police officer, even if they're unfounded, and use that against them when they are testifying in a criminal proceeding. I think it would be a prescription for abuse of this, and it would also not impede or prevent what happened in Minneapolis. Minneapolis doesn't have 50A. They had access to things. That it doesn't do that, but what it does do, it will cause abuse of our police officers, and it will hinder the ability to have those that have committed crimes. It will enable many people who've committed crimes to get off, because you will have people time and time again sending in complaint about a complaint just so there's a litany of complaints on a police officer record, so they are discredited when they go to court to talk to somebody that, on the issue of somebody they just arrested.
Mr. McMurray.
He's showing you who he's going to be in Washington. He's going to vote against anything that's not strictly on his party line. And the party line politics of Western New York has got us into the problems we're in right now, where we don't have a congressman at NY27, because people like Chris Jacobs wouldn't stand up and fight against him, because people wouldn't say this is wrong and he's a criminal. 50A is just saying the same thing you get from any other citizen in America. If you have violations against you, it was a way of finding out, is the person that was abusive to you, was he abusive to others? It's a way to protect the citizens of this country. And you voted against it because one of your consultants told you to do so.
Moving on, gentlemen, Mr. McMurray, this question up to you. One of the populations, of course, hardest hit by the pandemic is the elderly, and thousands have died in nursing homes all across New York State. So the question, do you support a federal investigation into how New York and the governor handled the state's pandemic response?
Yes, because I think there were serious problems. And this is the difference between myself and my opponent. If there's a problem by a Democrat, I still will have to look into that. Obviously, we had problems in New York State. With COVID, we've had a failure of leadership all around. From the governor in certain respects, he was far better than President Trump, but also President Trump. That's why we have 108,000 people dead. And there's people that are close to me that were sick, and there was a family member who passed away. This is something that was serious, that's still being ignored, and we're not preparing ourselves for what's coming in the fall. If I go to D.C., I will help to make sure that our region and our country is prepared.
Senator Jacobs.
I would say, and unlike Nate hates Donald Trump, and nothing he does he agrees with. You called anyone who supports Donald Trump a traitor.
No, I did not.
You did. You tweeted that out.
You show me the tweet.
I will show it.
You show me the tweet.
It will be up on my website after the. It will be up on the website.
Yeah, right. Okay. Listen.
But I just wanted to mention that I have complimented the governor on many things he did.
Sure, your family has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for the governor.
Mr. McMurray.
Can we stop the temper transfers?
No, I'm not. Listen, I'm going to hold you accountable,
Mr. McMurray.
So I've complimented the governor. I'm trying to support him where I can, because in a crisis, I think it's important to do that.
His family has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for the governor.
Mr. McMurray.
But I will say, this mistake that he made, this error in judgment, was so grievous, it undermined anything good he did. I mean, in Orleans County, which is in the 27th congressional district here, 97% of the people that died of COVID were in one nursing home. So this problem of saying you needed to go back if you were COVID positive, and they needed to take them to the most vulnerable population, that is why New York State leads in the amount of deaths. It's tragic, and yes, we need a full investigation.
I got a question for you right now. Is there anything that President Trump did wrong with COVID? Anything? Can you name something for us? How about hydroxychloroquine? Are you going to take some of that? Name one thing.
Moving on.
Can you name one thing?
Senator Jacobs. This question to you. President Trump has said mail-in voting will lead to rigged elections. So question is, are you concerned that this election will be rigged, given that many voters, almost 100,000 in Erie County alone, are going to cast their ballots through the mail?
I think we need to make sure that the process is secure. There's integrity to the process. There has been instances around the country of voter fraud. There is a problem with, the provisions that were done here, where they were not requiring even a signature on the absentee ballot. That makes this vulnerable. I mean, a big apartment building, somebody could grab all the absentees out of mailboxes. So we need to make sure, because people need to trust the process. Because if they don't trust the process, they won't participate in the process. So I think for the COVID crisis, it made sense to do it, but I think we need to go back to the way it was if you are infirmed or you are traveling, but across the board, that's the only way we're going to do it. I do think that will be vulnerable to fraud over a period of time.
Just to follow up on that, again, President Trump specifically said that the elections could be rigged. Do you support that strong of language when it comes to mail-in balloting?
I'm just saying this is a new frontier here in New York State, doing it the way that we're doing it. I am concerned if you're not signing it, there's very little consequence on fraud. So we just need to make sure there's integrity to the process. For this COVID situation, for this election, I was supportive of it, but I just don't think it should be blown up in the way it's done in every single election in this state. I think that will cause a problem with fraud and a problem with people fearing the integrity. And I will say another thing that's fearing the integrity is the green light bill, which is giving driver's licenses to illegal aliens. And Nate McMurray's for that, and that is ripe for abuse for voter fraud.
We will likely get to that in a little bit. Let's stay on topic. Let's stay on topic, if we could, about mail-in balloting.
There is no problem with mail-in ballots. We have to make sure the process improves, but he didn't answer that question about whether he agrees with President Trump. I'd like to hear an answer on that one. Do you agree with the conspiracies that President Trump is sharing out there? I certainly don't. And I'll tell you right now what we're going to do. When we go to Washington, we're going to make voter access easier for everyone. That includes, I propose to have Election Day be a day off from work so everyone can go, no problems. Other countries do it, we can do it too. More voter access is more democracy, and I will fight for it.
Senator Jacobs, I'm sorry, this will go back to Mr. McMurray. Let's go to Adam Chodak, who has a question for Mr. McMurray about job creation.
Governor Cuomo recently called on the federal government to rebuild the country's infrastructure and said he's spoken with the president about this issue. Do you support this as a way of creating jobs?
Yes. And I'll tell you what, President Trump promised us infrastructure, and here we are, 3.5 years into it, nothing. Nothing. Remember, he had the Senate, he had the House, and he had the executive branch and the courts, and all we got was a tax break for people like Chris Jacobs over here. What we need to do is pass infrastructure spending for our country that improves, first and foremost, the things that are already broken, our decaying bridges and roads, but also that fights for broadband. It's something I've been fighting for years. Even when I was a small town leader, I fought for broadband in that town. I'm sick of companies like Time Warner taking advantage of us. We can build a broadband network that will connect our communities, help our students. 100 years ago, America had the moxie to build things and create new ideas. We line this country with telephone wires and copper wires. There is no reason we can't build broadband today.
Senator Jacobs.
Yes, I was having coffee one day with a farmer in the district in his living room, and he said to me, Chris, try to use your phone right now. And I did, and obviously there was no signal. And he said, this is very common in our community here and hinders our children being able to learn online, hinders me to be able to do my work as a farmer. So I agree with the fact that infrastructure, we need to treat rural broadband as important as any road and bridge. But to get an infrastructure bill passed, you need to work with Congress. And unfortunately, Nancy Pelosi, Nate's friend, and the others in the Congress were busy with the impeachment sham as opposed to doing real work, which would have helped the 27th congressional district.
Can I
Mr. McMurray, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, he's a state senator. What has he ever done to pass broadband or help broadband in New York State? Zip. He already represents part of NY27. He did nothing for broadband. Even as a small town leader, I fought for a conduit for broadband to be put in the town. Look at his record. He'll be the same guy when he goes to Washington, except for he'll be a little bit different because he'll be trying to do everything he can to please Donald Trump.
Senator Jacobs calling into question your state record when it comes to infrastructure.
Actually, you can check. I did vote for broadband funding. I have.
Did you propose a bill?
Mr.
Did you fight for a bill?
And infrastructure funding. So anybody can check my record. I'm disappointed where the governor has been on. There's a little trick that Governor Cuomo does. Money's allocated frequently in a budget, and he doesn't let it out. And he holds it and hoards it. And he shifts it around. And this is part of the budget process that really needs reform in New York State. It's one of the reasons the state is in the trouble it's in. But I'm fully supportive of it. And I do believe if we're going to talk about a new stimulus, infrastructure is really where it should go. That is roads and bridges. Those have a long-term benefit to communities, and it's worth it if we're going to spend money on that.
Next question directed to Senator Jacobs. There are calls for the federal government to withhold business loans and assistance to companies that refuse to hire back the same number of employees that they laid off. So is this something that you would support? And what should the federal government's role be in rebuilding businesses really hard hit by the pandemic?
Well, that's interesting. I have not heard that issue, so I look into it. I will say what I have heard from small businesses, the biggest problem is in hiring people back is this $600 increase in the unemployment that the Democrats lopped into the stimulus bill. So we have people who were laid off as a result of COVID who are now making more money on unemployment and this $600 increase, so they won't come back. That's the problem we have, and we need a policy fix on that. That was a flaw in this bill.
Remember, he said that he already worked for broadband, because I want to remind everybody how good their broadband is right now and how much he's done to stop Time Warner from taking advantage of Spectrum. Zero. It's all talk. Beyond that, let's talk about the stimulus bill. I want everyone listening to realize guys like Chris Jacobs are not the economy. You are the economy. The reason why the economy is frozen right now is because you can't go to stores, you can't go to restaurants, you can't go to the movie theater. And remember, the power lies with you. And so we should be doing everything in our power to get more money into your pockets, not more money into pockets like the guys like him. And this money we gave to this stimulus bill to these companies that were already flush with cash, that now we're not going to re-employ their employees, they're going to let them go? It's wrong. And I'll fight against it.
This next question goes to Mr. McMurray. Another question regarding the pandemic and especially pay for some of these frontline workers. It has been also floated that these frontline workers deserve hazard pay. And so the question is it the federal government's responsibility to help states pay for that, or should the government take it on?
There is a role for government to help. And right now we are in a crisis. President Trump recognized the crisis. Now he's forgotten about it. But we are in a crisis. And yes, there is a role for the federal government. Everyone out there should listen and remember this and look it up. There's a $500 billion slush fund with no strings attached for the biggest companies in the world. There's a $170 billion tax exemption for people like Chris Jacobs, real estate developers. 2 years ago, we gave a $2 trillion tax cut that may be as much as $3 trillion soon that puts Social Security at risk. When I go to Washington, my priority will not be giving people like him more money. He's got plenty. I want to help the people of Batavia, the people of Albion, the people of Warsaw. And if that means giving hazard pay to first responders and to keep them safe, we'll figure out a way to do it.
Senator Jacobs, to you, sir.
I think it's a good idea. I think we've found the critical importance of frontline workers. I think we've also found that our definition of frontline worker has expanded from healthcare workers beyond that, delivery workers, food service workers in grocery stores and others who have kept the lights on and kept us being able to live during this critically important time. I would say it should be a partnership. I think it should be a partnership between the state government, federal government, and actually maybe the foundation community, because this is a community issue. The community has benefited, and maybe this is awakening on the importance of these jobs.
This next question also going to Senator Jacobs. In the past decade, this district has seen 2 Republican congressmen leave in disgrace, Chris Collins and Chris Lee. So, Senator Jacobs, how can you assure voters that you will not leave this seat in the same condition as your predecessors, who also happen to be named Chris?
Well, I think it's important for the voters to look at people's record. And I have been in this community my whole life. I've been active in this community as a business person, and I think anybody who's worked with me in business has said I'm a person of integrity, and my handshake means something. My involvement in the community and helping children have a better chance for a private religious education, and my service at government as a school board member, as Erie County Clerk, in the state Senate. My record, I've governed and represented with integrity. I've always listened to people on different sides of the issue. That's my approach, that's my leadership style, and I will continue to do that. And I think it's my hope that when the voters look at me and my record of experience and service, that they will choose me.
Mr. McMurray.
I want you to look at his record. Voting against COVID sick pay. Again, not standing up to Chris Collins, that got us into this mess. I want you to look at his record. His record is a flip-flopper, a person that will say anything to stay in office. Remember, this is a man who ran for lieutenant governor, I think when I was in high school or college. It was years ago. He's been in politics his entire life. But even a year ago, he wouldn't even say Donald Trump's name. And then suddenly he's best friends with the guy? He is someone who will say anything to stay in office. It's the source of his power, and we should defy him for doing it.
Senator Jacobs, do you have a response to that?
Oh, I disagree completely with Nate, and I don't think he has any facts to back that, but that's not unusual.
Sure you do. We can show you the video. We can show you the news articles by Breitbart.
As far as my record,
why don't you ask Stefan Mahailu and Beth Parlato what they think about him as a Republican?
Mr. McMurray.
I would just ask the voters to just look at my record, and they can make accusations and say things about family members of mine or whatever you want. I think my record will speak for itself of service and commitment to this community, not just in elected office, but as a small business person and a community-involved citizen. That's how I have tried to make a difference in this community I love. I want to take the experience that I've garnered in my public life, in my private sector life, and working in a nonprofit. I believe I have the skill set right now to be ready to be an impactful congressman at this point in time.
Chris, you have proven yourself to be an opportunist, and I'm going to look at you when I say it. You're one of the richest men in America. You did not need to change who you are to sell out to Donald Trump to win this position, and it's going to haunt you for the rest of your life because the people of your current district, a Democratic-leaning district, know that you faked. And also the Republicans across NY27, they know this man will change on a dime. If you think you're voting for a conservative now, trust me, next week it might be quite different.
Gentlemen, moving on now, let's hear again from WROC's Adam Chodak, who has another question for Mr. McMurray.
Mr. McMurray, President Trump won this district by nearly 25 percentage points in 2016. How do you expect to win over voters who have shown that they overwhelmingly support the president?
Now, listen, if I wanted to be a fake and a salesman, I would just say, hey, I love President Trump, like Mr. Jacobs is doing. But I'm telling the people of this district, you may not agree with who I am. You may not agree with what I stand for. But you know what I believe, and you know I will tell you the truth. And I think the people of this region realize that someone who is sincere, when they're sick of a world of politicians that will say anything to hold on to power and get elected, someone who's different, who will come forward and say, this is what I believe and I'm going to fight like hell for it. That's who I am. So listen, I hope that voters of this district realize that I've been fighting for it for a long time. I've been going to Albion, I've been having town halls, I've been going to Warsaw, I've been going to all the 8 counties of the district, and I care about the people of this district desperately. That's why I want to defy this man, because I know he will go to Washington and do what all the other Chris's have done, which is take advantage of the people of this district. And I refuse to let it go easy, and I refuse not to fight for the people of this region.
Senator Jacobs.
Well, I would just say it's clear that Nate McMurray not only doesn't represent or align with the interests and the values of the 27th Congressional District, he mocks them. This is just an example of gun rights. The many hunters, people who believe in the Second Amendment in the 27th Congressional District. I am supported by the NRA. Nate tweeted, gun owners are part of the most insecure and dangerous club on earth.
No, I never tweeted that.
We have this tweet.
He is literally making stuff up.
And he said,
I can't believe it. He's just making stuff up.
May I finish?
I'll say what I believe.
Mr. McMurray, I will give you an opportunity.
I can't believe
Mr. McMurray, I will give you an opportunity.
I am shocked.
I'll give you an opportunity.
Any regular...
He said the
Mr. McMurray.
Go ahead.
He said the NRA are homegrown terrorists. I am pro-life. He is pro-abortion. He said abortion opponents are the American Taliban. That's another tweet of Nate McMurray.
There we go.
You'll see it on my website,
Yep.
all these tweets. He not only doesn't represent the interests of this district, he mocks the district.
Give me the quote.
Mr. McMurray, allow him to finish, and I will give you an opportunity. We are running short on time. I need you to allow him to finish, and I'll give you opportunity.
I'm finished.
Yep. But he's just making stuff up.
That's not
so
true.
let me say this right now. Do I represent the values of this district? I don't know. My family has been in this district for 7 generations. They live across the district. They're all in every inch of the district. I don't even think you could find half these towns on a map. So I have been I am an Eagle Scout. I've been a gun owner my entire adult life, and he is labeling me as someone. Do you really believe, the listeners out there, that this man, who has showed no interest in this district before, is suddenly going to represent you once you represented who you are? He is using you. He is going to take advantage of this district. And I will fight for the working families of this district, because those are my families and my friend.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Appreciate it. That concludes now the question and answer portion of the debate. We are going to ask now that the candidates begin their closing statements. You will each have 30 seconds on closings, and because we had Senator Jacobs going first for opening statements, we will also have Senator Jacobs go first for closing statements. Senator Jacobs.
Thank you very much. I wanted to thank Channel 4 for doing this debate tonight. I want to thank Nate McMurray for being here. This is a challenging time, and a challenging time in our society. And with the crises we have in the nation, we have a crisis in Washington. We have radical leftists who are going to want to take this nation towards their ideal vision of socialism by using the crisis to pass policies to do that. Nate McMurray is aligned with those people. AOC, Bernie Sanders, those are the people he aligns with. Those are the people we're going to work with in Washington. I want to fight for your values in the 27th Congressional District. I ask for your vote on June 23rd. Thank you.
Mr. McMurray.
Look, we've had Chris Lee, an insider millionaire who resigned in disgrace. We had Chris Collins, who myself and many people across NY27 fought when Mr. Jacobs was silent, another millionaire who resigned in disgrace. And now we have Chris Jacobs. Do you really think he's going to be different? Guys like me, we have to fight. No one ever gave me $1. I had to work for everything in my life, and I had to fight my way into this room. And I'll tell you what, when I go to Washington, I will fight for you. And I'll do it with honor, I'll do it with diligence, and I'll bring back hope to NY27.
Gentlemen, once again, thank you. We want to thank both candidates for taking part in tonight's debate. This conversation will certainly continue over on our website, WYVB.com. Keep in mind, big reminder, Election Day is June 23rd. We urge you to get educated on the vast issues that affect Western New York, and there are many. There are many issues that we were not able to get to tonight. But again, if you head to our website, WYVB.com, we have a lot of information from both candidates regarding where they stand on issues that are important to you. So we are hoping that you have an opportunity to get educated and to cast your ballot. From all of us here at your local election headquarters, WYVB and WROC, we hope you all have a good night and be well.